"I can translate," said the executive's daughter in shock without an interpreter at the meeting. David Thompson was sweating cold in the conference room on the 23rd floor of his office in New York City when he received the call that would change everything. The Japanese interpreter had cancelled at the last minute due to a family emergency, and the most important meeting of his business career was scheduled to begin in just 20 minutes. "Dad, why are you so nervous?" asked little Emily, just 4 years old, sitting on the leather couch in the room, playing with her coloring books. The girl had been brought to the office because the babysitter had also cancelled that day, and David had no choice but to take her with him. Her curly hair was tied back with a light blue bow, and she wore a grey dress her maternal grandmother had bought on her last visit. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Daddy's just a little worried about work," David replied, trying to hide the desperation in his voice. In truth, that meeting represented the salvation of his tech company. Over the past 2 years, since his wife Jennifer had passed away in an accident, David had struggled to keep both the business and raising Emily in balance. The company was facing serious financial difficulties, and the Japanese investment was their only hope to avoid bankruptcy. The phone rang again. It was Michael Wilson, his business partner and best friend of over 15 years. "David, did you sort out the interpreter situation? The Japanese are already in the elevator," Michael said, his voice tense. "I couldn't find anyone. I called every translation agency in the city, but no one's available on such short notice," David replied, running a hand through his graying hair. "My God, David, do you know what this means? It's $3 million in investment. If we lose this opportunity..." David didn't need Michael to finish the sentence. He knew exactly what was at stake. His company, Thompson Tech, had developed revolutionary hospital management software, but they needed Japanese capital to expand and compete in the international market. The door to the room opened, and his secretary, Mrs. Wilkins, a 65-year-old woman who had worked with David for a decade, entered with a worried expression. "Mr. Thompson, the investors are here. Mr. Kenji Tanaka and his 2 associates are in reception. What should I tell them?" David looked at Emily, who was still coloring quietly, oblivious to the tension in the room. For a moment, he considered cancelling the meeting, but he knew this was likely his last chance. "Send them up, Mrs. Wilkins. We'll try to explain the situation and see if we can reschedule." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. 5 minutes later, 3 Japanese men entered the conference room. Mr. Tanaka, a short man around 50, greeted David with a polite bow. His 2 younger associates carried leather briefcases and tablets. "Mr. Thompson, it's a pleasure to meet you in person," Tanaka said in heavily accented English. David immediately realized the Japanese investor's English was limited, making the absence of an interpreter even more problematic. During preparations for the meeting, they had agreed all negotiations would be conducted in Japanese to make Tanaka feel more comfortable. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Tanaka. Unfortunately, I must inform you that our interpreter had a family emergency and couldn't attend today. I'd like to know if you'd prefer to reschedule our meeting." Tanaka's expression darkened instantly. He quickly spoke in Japanese with his assistants, and David noticed from their body language that things weren't going well. "Mr. Thompson," said Tanaka, switching back to hesitant English, "we came all the way from Japan specifically for this meeting. Our schedule is very tight. Tomorrow we fly to Los Angeles for other business, and then we return to Tokyo." David felt his heart tighten. He knew this was his only chance, and it was slipping through his fingers like sand. "I completely understand, Mr. Tanaka. Perhaps we can try to communicate in English, even with the limitations." At that moment, Tanaka began speaking rapidly in Japanese, gesturing in what seemed like irritation. His words were incomprehensible to David, who could only sense the growing frustration in his tone. Then a soft little voice cut through the tension in the room. "I can translate, Daddy." Everyone turned to look at Emily, who had gotten up from the couch and was walking toward the meeting table, her 4-year-old self clutching colorful drawings in her hand. A stunned silence fell over the room. David felt as if time had stopped. Tanaka stopped mid-sentence and stared at the little girl with utter surprise. "Emily, sweetheart, go back to your drawing," said David, trying to mask his embarrassment. But the girl completely ignored her father and addressed Tanaka directly. To everyone's shock, she began speaking in flawless Japanese. Oji-san, naze sonna ni okote iru no desu ka? Papa wa totemo ihito desu yo. The impact of those words was devastating. Tanaka opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His two assistants exchanged disbelieving glances. David's legs felt weak. Emily, what are you saying? He stammered. The girl turned to her father with her usual ease. I told the Japanese man he doesn't need to be angry, that you're a very good person, Daddy. Tanaka finally regained his composure and crouched down to Emily's level. Kimi wa doko de Nihongo wo narata no desu ka? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Oba-chan ga oshiete kurete imasu, Emily replied, smiling innocently. She said her grandmother is teaching her, Tanaka translated for David, who had gone pale as a ghost. The problem was David's mother had passed away 2 years ago, and Jennifer's mother lived in rural Connecticut, with no knowledge of Japanese. David had no idea where his daughter had learned the language. Emily, which grandmother is teaching you Japanese? He asked, kneeling beside her. Grandma Yumiko, Daddy. You know, the heart grandma who stays with me when you work too much. David felt his blood run cold. He didn't know any Yumiko, let alone someone who could be looking after Emily without his knowledge. Tanaka, meanwhile, seemed increasingly moved. He continued the conversation with Emily in Japanese, and the girl responded with a fluency that left every adult in the room speechless. Mrs. Wilkins, who had stayed in the room to assist if needed, watched with tears in her eyes. Something extraordinary was happening here, something beyond any logical explanation. Mr. David, she whispered, this is a miracle. Michael, who had remained silent in the corner until now, slowly approached. David, where on earth did your daughter learn Japanese, and who is this Grandma Yumiko? Before David could answer, Emily tugged on Tanaka's sleeve and said something in Japanese that visibly moved him. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his eyes. What did she say? David asked, desperate for answers. She said that Grandma Yumiko always says that the hearts of good people shine like stars, and that when she looks at you, she sees many stars shining, translated Tanaka, his voice choked. The words hit David like a punch to the gut. That was exactly the expression his late wife Jennifer used when talking about special people. She always said kind-hearted people had stars shining in their hearts. Emily kept talking with Tanaka, and with every word exchanged between them, the Japanese executive seemed more impressed. At one point, he asked a more serious question, and Emily responded by pointing to the documents on the table. She wants to know about your work papers, Daddy, translated Emily. Can I explain it to him? David was so stunned he could only nod. What followed was even more extraordinary. Emily picked up the project documents and began explaining in perfect Japanese all the technical details of the software the company had developed. She used technical terms David never imagined she knew, talking about hospital data management, system integration, and operational efficiency analysis. Tanaka's advisors began frantically taking notes, impressed not only by the girl's fluency, but by the depth of her knowledge about the project. This is impossible, murmured Michael. She's 4 years old. How can she know these technical terms? For 40 minutes, Emily practically led the entire project presentation by herself. She answered Tanaka's technical questions with surgical precision, explained the software's competitive advantages, and even discussed financial projections. David watched everything in shock. His 4-year-old daughter was leading the most important business meeting of his life, and doing it with a competence that would impress any senior executive. At one point, Tanaka asked a question that made Emily hesitate for the first time. She looked at her father with a confused expression. Daddy, the Japanese man wants to know about a part of the contract that talks about territorial exclusivity. I don't understand that part. That's when Michael stepped forward, took the documents, and pointed to a specific section. Let me explain this part, Emily. But as Michael began reading the document, his expression changed drastically. There was a clause he didn't remember discussing with David, one that gave the Japanese company exclusive rights not just in Japan, but across all of Asia, including China and South Korea. "David, did you see this clause here?" asked Michael, pointing to the text. David took the document and quickly read it. His eyes widened as he understood what was written. "I never agreed to this. This clause severely limits our future expansion." Emily watched the exchange between the two men and then spoke to Tanaka again in Japanese. The investor responded with a serious expression, and the two talked for a few minutes. "What are you talking about?" asked David. "The Japanese man said this clause was suggested by Uncle Michael in the preliminary email negotiations," translated Emily innocently. David's blood ran cold. He slowly turned to Michael, who looked visibly uncomfortable. "Michael, what does this mean?" "David, I can explain." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, but before Michael could offer any explanation, Emily spoke to Tanaka again. This time their conversation lasted several minutes, and David noticed the Japanese investor's expression growing increasingly serious. Finally, Tanaka addressed David in English. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter told me something very interesting. She said she overheard a conversation between Mr. Michael and someone on the phone, where he talked about making the deal fail to buy out your share of the company." The impact of those words was like a bomb exploding in the room. David turned to Michael with a look of utter disbelief. "Is this true, Michael?" Michael had gone completely pale. His hands trembled slightly as he struggled to find words to explain himself. "David, you don't understand. The company is going under. I was trying to save it the only way I knew how. By sabotaging me. That was your plan to save the company." Emily continued translating for Tanaka, who listened with growing indignation. At one point, the Japanese investor stood abruptly and spoke firmly to his assistants. "What's he saying?" David asked. "He said he doesn't do business with dishonest people," Emily translated. "But that you seem like a good person, Dad." Tanaka then spoke directly to David in Japanese for Emily to translate. "He wants to know if you were aware of Uncle Michael's plan." David knelt and looked straight into his daughter's eyes. "Tell Mr. Tanaka I knew nothing. That Uncle Michael was my best friend for 15 years, and I trusted him completely." Emily faithfully translated her father's words. Tanaka listened carefully and then asked another question. "He wants to know what you'll do now," the girl translated. David looked at Michael, who avoided his gaze, and then at Tanaka. He knew this was a decisive moment, not just for his business, but for his integrity as a person. "Tell Mr. Tanaka I'm dissolving my partnership with Uncle Michael immediately, that I'd rather lose everything than engage in dishonest business." Emily's translation visibly shifted Tanaka's expression. The man spoke quickly with his assistants in Japanese before addressing Emily again. "He said you're a man of honor, Dad, and he only wants to do business with you," the girl translated, smiling. It was then that something unexpected happened. Emily, who had been tirelessly translating for nearly an hour, suddenly seemed dizzy. She brought a hand to her forehead and swayed slightly. "Dad, I feel strange," she murmured. Before David could react, Emily collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Panic filled the room. David dropped to his knees beside his daughter, checking her breathing and pulse. Tanaka also rushed over, visibly concerned. "Call an ambulance," David shouted to Mrs. Wilkins, who was already dialing. "I'm calling now, Mr. David." Michael, despite everything that had happened, also stepped forward to help. "She's breathing normally, David. Her pulse seems steady too." For the 15 minutes it took the ambulance to arrive, Emily remained unconscious. David couldn't stop blaming himself for letting his daughter push herself so hard. At the hospital, after a full round of tests, the doctor came to speak with David. "Mr. Thompson, physically, your daughter is perfectly fine. All the tests came back normal. From what we can tell, she had some kind of mental exhaustion, likely caused by prolonged concentration." "But doctor, she was speaking Japanese fluently. Is that normal for a 4-year-old? The doctor gave him a puzzled look. "Frankly, Mr. Thompson, it's not. Children at that age can learn languages quickly, but the level of fluency you described is extraordinary. I'd recommend having her evaluated by a pediatric neuropsychologist. When Emily finally woke up a few hours later, she seemed completely normal. But when David tried to talk to her about what had happened in the meeting, the girl looked at him with a confused expression. "What meeting, Daddy? I was playing in your office and then woke up here in the hospital." Emily didn't remember anything at all about the Japanese translation. It was as if those hours had been completely erased from her memory. Over the following days, David desperately tried to understand what had happened. He questioned Emily about this Grandma Yumiko, but the girl insisted she didn't know anyone by that name. That's when Mrs. Wilkins came to talk to him. "Mr. Thompson, I need to confess something. During these months when Miss Emily would come to the office, I noticed she'd disappear for long periods when she was with me." "What do you mean, disappear?" "The regular nanny Bridget would go out to run errands and ask me to keep an eye on Emily. But I realized that during those hours, the girl would vanish from the office. I thought she was playing hide and seek somewhere in the building." David felt a chill in his stomach. "Mrs. Wilkins, are you saying my daughter was left unsupervised?" "Not exactly alone, Mr. Thompson. I found out she was going up to the top floor of the building where Mrs. Yumiko Kato's office is." David's heart raced when he heard that name. "Who is Yumiko Kato?" "A 72-year-old Japanese woman who has a small consulting office on the top floor. She's a widow. She lost her children in an accident a few years ago. I thought maybe you knew." David knew nothing about it. He immediately took Emily and went up to the top floor of the building. When he knocked on the door of Office 2301, a soft voice answered in Portuguese with a strong Japanese accent. "Come in, please." The door opened, revealing a petite, elegant Japanese woman with white hair tied in a bun. Her eyes lit up when she saw Emily. "Emily-chan," she exclaimed, opening her arms. To David's astonishment, his daughter ran into the Japanese woman's arms as if she'd known her for years. "Grandma Yumiko," Emily cried, hugging her tightly. David watched the touching scene for a few minutes before introducing himself. "Mrs. Kato, my name is David Thompson. I'm Emily's father. I need to speak with you." Yumiko invited them both into her simple but cozy office. The walls were covered with family photos and university diplomas. David noticed she had been a language professor at Columbia University. "Mr. Thompson, I imagine you're confused about how your daughter and I know each other," Yumiko said, serving them green tea. "Can you explain it to me?" Yumiko took a deep breath before beginning. "About 6 months ago, I was in the elevator when Emily came in alone. She was crying because she was lost. I brought her to my office and we managed to locate her nanny, who was frantically searching for her. And after that, Emily started coming here regularly. I found out the nanny often left her alone to go out and do other things. The girl felt abandoned and found companionship in me." David felt a wave of guilt and anger at the same time. Guilt for not realizing Emily was being neglected, and anger at the nanny who had betrayed his trust. "Did you start teaching her Japanese?" Yumiko smiled sadly. "I didn't exactly teach her. Emily has a very special gift, Mr. Thompson. She absorbs languages in a way I've never seen in over 40 years as a university professor." "How so?" "She would simply listen when I spoke Japanese on the phone with my friends in Japan, or when I sang traditional songs to calm her. Within weeks, she began repeating words. Within months, she was speaking full sentences." Emily, who was playing on the floor with some toys Yumiko kept in the office, lifted her head. "Grandma Yumiko tells really beautiful stories in Japanese, Daddy, and she taught me a song about stars that shine in the hearts of good people." Emily's words confirmed David's suspicions. That phrase about stars shining in the heart was exactly what Jennifer used to say. "Mrs. Kato, my wife used to say that same thing about stars in the heart. Did you know Jennifer?" Yumiko grew emotional. "Mr. Thompson, I met your wife briefly, a few months before the accident. She came to my office looking for Japanese lessons because you were considering expanding your business to Japan. We only spoke twice, but she mentioned that belief about stars in the hearts of good people." David fell silent for a few minutes, processing everything. Jennifer had never mentioned the Japanese lessons, probably because she wanted it to be a surprise. "Mr. Thompson," Yumiko continued, "when Emily started coming here, she talked about you constantly, about how hard you worked and how sad you sometimes were. I began telling her stories about Japan, about business, and about how honest people always win in the end. Is that how she knew the technical terms? I showed her some of the projects I worked on as a consultant. She has an extraordinary ability to absorb things. But Mr. Thompson, I must confess something important. David braced himself for another revelation. What is it? A week ago I was hospitalized with severe pneumonia. I couldn't let Emily know, and I imagine she missed me terribly. I believe that's what awakened in her the need to use everything she'd learned to help you. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place for David. Emily had developed a deep emotional bond with Yumiko, and when she felt her heart grandma needed help, something inside her unlocked the ability to use everything she'd absorbed over those months. Are you feeling better now? I'm recovering, but the doctor said I'll need special care for the next few months. Unfortunately, I have no family here in the United States. My only relatives are in Japan. David looked at Emily, who had fallen asleep on Yumiko's couch while they talked. An idea began forming in his mind. Just then, his phone rang. It was Tanaka. Mr. Thompson, how is your daughter? She's fine, Mr. Tanaka. Thank you for asking. Mr. Thompson, after everything that happened yesterday, my advisors and I had a long discussion. We'd like to make an official investment offer, but only with you, not your former partner. David closed his eyes, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Mr. Tanaka, it would be an honor, but I must be honest. Without Michael, I'm not sure I can run the company alone. Mr. Thompson, after seeing your daughter's integrity and your own honesty in such a difficult situation, we're certain you're exactly the kind of partner we're looking for. Besides, we'd like to propose something else. What would that be? We'd like to hire the translation and consulting services of the woman who taught your daughter Japanese. We believe she could be a great asset to our business here in the United States. David looked at Yumiko, who had overheard the conversation. Mrs. Kato, would you be interested? Yumiko's eyes sparkled. Mr. Thompson, it would be an honor to work with you. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Over the following weeks, David worked tirelessly to resolve the situation with Michael. He discovered that his former partner had accumulated gambling debts even David hadn't imagined, and the plan to sabotage the meeting was a desperate attempt to get quick money by buying David's share at a low price after the deal failed. Though he felt deep sadness over the betrayal of someone he considered his best friend, David decided not to take legal action against Michael. Instead, he used part of the Japanese investment to settle his former partner's gambling debts, on the condition that he seek professional help for his addiction. David, why are you doing this for me? Michael asked during their last conversation in the office. Because Emily taught me something important in that meeting, Michael. She showed me that even in the toughest situations, honesty and compassion are always the right path. Michael left the company with tears in his eyes, but also with a chance to start his life over. With the Japanese investment secured, David was able to significantly expand the company. But more important than the financial success were the changes he made in his personal life. First, he fired the negligent nanny and hired a new, highly qualified professional. Most importantly, he completely reorganized his work schedule to spend more time with Emily. Daddy, why don't you stay late at the office anymore? Emily asked one evening during dinner. Because I realized you're far more important than any meeting or contract, my dear. David also invited Yumiko to stay in the guest house of his home during her recovery. The Japanese woman's presence brought special joy to Emily, as well as wisdom David hadn't realized he needed. Mr. Thompson, Yumiko said one afternoon as they watched Emily play in the garden, do you know why your daughter did what she did in that meeting? I still don't fully understand. Children have a unique capacity for unconditional love. Emily did all that not to impress the Japanese, but because she wanted to help you. The love she feels for you unlocked abilities even she didn't know she had. Do you think she'll start speaking Japanese again? She never stopped speaking Japanese. It's just that now she doesn't need to use that gift to solve adults' problems. She can use it simply to have fun and learn. And Yumiko was right. In the weeks that followed, Emily naturally began speaking Japanese again during playtime with her heart grandma. But now it was different. It was a skill she used for pleasure, not out of necessity. The business with the Japanese flourished beyond all expectations. The software developed by Thomson Tech became a benchmark in the Asian market, and David found himself in a position to expand to other countries. But the real transformation happened in the relationship between father and daughter. David learned to cherish every moment with Emily, and she blossomed under his attention and care. "Daddy, do you remember when those Japanese men came to your office?" Emily asked one day, months after the incident. "I do, sweetheart." "Why?" "I don't really remember what happened, but I remember you were really happy afterward, and I like it when you're happy." David hugged his daughter, overwhelmed with emotion. Emily might not remember the details of that extraordinary day, but she remembered what truly mattered. The love between them had grown stronger. Yumiko fully recovered and decided to stay in the United States. David officially hired her as the company's cultural consultant, and she became a precious bridge between American and Japanese cultures in the company's business. "Grandma Yumiko," Emily said one day, "will you stay with us forever?" "If you'll have me, Emily-chan, I'll stay here until the stars in my heart stop shining." The expression made David smile. Jennifer would have been proud to see how this unconventional family had formed and thrived. A year after the meeting that changed their lives, David was once again in a conference room. But this time the situation was completely different. He was signing a contract to open a cultural center that would connect American children with elderly people of various nationalities through language learning. "Is this a tribute to that special day?" asked Tanaka, who had become not just a business partner but a dear friend. "It's a tribute to the power of love to connect people from different cultures," David replied. Emily, now 5 years old, was present at the ceremony. She had become the youngest cultural ambassador of the center, helping other children discover the joy of learning new languages from caring elders. "Daddy, can I say something to Mr. Tanaka?" Emily asked. "Of course, sweetheart." Emily addressed Tanaka in perfect Japanese, but this time David could understand a few basic words Yumiko had taught him. "Arigato gozaimasu, Tanaka-san. Anata wa watashi no kazoku desu." Tanaka was visibly moved and replied in the same language. Then he turned to David. "She said thank you and that she considers me part of the family." "And you are, Tanaka-san. All of you are." David looked around the room, seeing Yumiko chatting animatedly with other elders who would participate in the project, Emily playing with children of various ages eager to learn new languages, and Tanaka planning the center's expansion to other cities. At that moment, he realized the true miracle of that day in the meeting hadn't been Emily's astonishing language ability. The real miracle had been discovering that love could create impossible connections between people, cultures, and generations. "Grandma Yumiko," Emily called, "can you tell that story about the stars?" "Which story, Emily-chan?" "The one that says when good people meet, the stars in their hearts throw a light party." Yumiko smiled and began telling the story in Japanese, with Emily translating for the other children. David watched the scene and felt Jennifer was present in some way, approving the special family they had built. 2 years later, the cultural center had expanded to 12 American cities and was beginning to be implemented in other countries. Emily, now 7, spoke 4 languages fluently and had become a minor celebrity for her ability to connect people through languages. But she was still a normal child who loved playing in the garden, watching cartoons and pulling typical childhood pranks. The difference was that now she grew up surrounded by love, attention, and purpose. "Daddy, why was that day so special?" Emily asked one afternoon as they organized toys in her room. David stopped what he was doing and sat on the bed beside his daughter. "Because that day, I discovered you're the most precious treasure I could ever have. And I also learned that sometimes miracles happen when we least expect them." "And Grandma Yumiko? Is she our treasure too?" "Yes, sweetheart. Grandma Yumiko is family to us in every way that matters." Emily hugged her father tightly. "I love you, Daddy. Even when I don't remember everything that happened, I always remember how much you love me." "And I'll always love you, Emily." No matter what, you'll always be my brightest little star." That night, after Emily fell asleep, David went to the garden where Yumiko tended a small patch of Japanese flowers. She was watering them under the moonlight. "Yumiko-san, may I ask you something?" "Of course, David-san." "Do you believe in fate?" Yumiko smiled and kept watering the flowers. "I believe that when our hearts are open to love, the universe conspires to bring us together with the right people at the right time." "Do you think Jennifer somehow orchestrated all of this?" "I think Jennifer's love for both of you created such a powerful energy that it still protects and guides this family. Emily carries the best of both her parents within her, and that's a gift she'll share with the world for the rest of her life." David stayed silent for a few minutes, gazing at the stars and thinking about life's unexpected turns. "Yumiko-san, thank you for taking care of Emily when she needed it most. Thank you for giving me a reason to keep living when I needed it most. Emily saved my life just as much as I helped save hers." 5 years had passed since that extraordinary meeting. Emily, now 12, had grown into a bright, multilingual teenager, but she was still the same warm and intuitive girl she'd always been. The cultural center David had founded had expanded into an international network, connecting thousands of children and seniors across dozens of countries. His tech company had become one of the most respected in the United States, but David never again let work take precedence over family. "Dad, I have a question," Emily said one morning over breakfast. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Why do people always get so amazed when I talk about that day in your meeting? I barely remember anything." David exchanged a glance with Yumiko, who was now officially her second mother. They'd agreed that when Emily asked this, they'd tell her the whole truth. "Emily, that day you did something extraordinary that changed our lives forever." And then David told her the full story about the crucial meeting, Michael Wilson's betrayal, how Emily had fluently translated in Japanese for a full hour, not only saving the deal, but revealing important truths about the people around them. Emily listened quietly, wide-eyed. "I really did all that." "You did, my girl. And it was the most important day of my life because that's when I realized you're not just my daughter, you're my hero. But I barely remember any of it. And you don't need to remember the details, Emily. What matters is that your heart was in the right place wanting to help the people you love. That's what truly counts." Emily was thoughtful for a few minutes. "So that's why our lives changed so much. Why Grandma Yumiko came to live with us. Why we started the cultural center. It all began that day, but it continued because we chose to build a family based on love, honesty, and compassion." That afternoon, Emily asked to visit the office where it had all happened. David took her to the meeting room, now mostly used for video calls with their cultural centers worldwide. "This is where I spoke Japanese," Emily asked, touching the table where documents had once been scattered years before. "This is where you saved our family, my girl." Emily smiled and then said something that made David's heart race. "Arigato gozaimasu, Otu-san. I love you." David hugged her, moved. "You still remember Japanese." "I never forgot, Dad. I just didn't need to use it anymore to solve grown-up problems. But now that I'm older, I want to use it to help others, just like Grandma Yumiko taught me." In that moment, David knew Emily had become exactly the person Jennifer would have wanted her to be. Someone who uses her special gifts to spread love and unity in the world. 15 years after that life-changing meeting, Emily is now a 19-year-old graduate in international relations and linguistics. She personally runs 3 cultural centers and plans to expand the project to Africa and Oceania. David, now 52, divides his time between his thriving tech company and the social projects he and Emily developed together. Yumiko, at 87, remains the family matriarch, teaching Japanese to a new generation of children and sharing her wisdom through stories. "Dad, do you regret anything from back then?" Emily asked during a recent conversation. "I regret not realizing sooner that you were being neglected by the nanny. I regret trusting Michael too much without questioning his strange behavior, but I don't regret anything that happened after that day." "What about Uncle Michael? Do you still think about him?" David sighed. Michael had overcome his gambling addiction with the professional help David funded and now worked as a rehabilitation counselor for people with similar struggles. They didn't keep in touch, but David occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances. "I think about him and hope he's happy. What he did was wrong, but I understand he was desperate. Sometimes people make terrible choices when they're afraid." "Did you forgive him?" "I forgave him a long time ago, Emily. Holding on to bitterness only hurts the one who holds it." Emily smiled, proud of her father's wisdom. "Grandma Yumiko always says forgiveness is the greatest gift we can give ourselves." And she's right, as always. That evening, during family dinner, Yumiko made an unexpected announcement. "David-san, Emily-chan, I have something to tell you." They both listened closely, noticing the seriousness in the Japanese matriarch's tone. "I received a call from my relatives in Japan. They want me to return and spend my final years there, close to family." The silence that followed was heavy. Yumiko had become such a part of the family that the thought of losing her was unthinkable. "Grandma Yumiko," Emily said, her voice trembling, "you can't leave. We're your family now." "You will always be my heart's family, Emily-chan. But I must think about what's best for all of us." David's heart ached, but he knew he couldn't be selfish. "Yumiko-san, if you wish to return to Japan, we'll support your decision. But I want you to know, this will always be your home." Over the following weeks, Yumiko thought deeply about her choice. She spent long hours talking with Emily about the meaning of family, roots, and belonging. "Grandma Yumiko, why is your family in Japan more important than us?" Emily asked one afternoon. "Not more important, Emily-chan, different. They are blood family, you are heart family, both are precious." "Then why are you thinking of leaving?" Yumiko sighed deeply. "Because I'm 87, and I feel I must make peace with my past before it's too late." 2 weeks later, Yumiko made her final decision. "I'll stay." David and Emily were overjoyed, but Yumiko continued. "On one condition. I want you both to come with me to Japan to meet my family. I want them to see the wonderful family I found in the United States." That's how 6 months later, David and Emily took their first international trip together. In Japan, they were welcomed by Yumiko's family as true relatives, and Emily could finally practice her Japanese in the country where the language was born. "Otu-san," Emily said one evening in Tokyo, "now I understand why that day was so special." "Why, my dear?" "Because it wasn't just about saving your company or uncovering Uncle Michael's betrayal. It was about discovering that families can form in unexpected ways, and that love knows no borders or languages." David hugged his daughter, knowing she had learned the most important lesson of their lives. When they returned to the United States, they had a new project, creating a cultural exchange program that would connect American and Japanese families, allowing them to learn from one another. "Grandma Yumiko," Emily said, "do you want me to share our story with other families?" "Our story could inspire many people, Emily-chan. But always remember, what happened that day in the meeting was just the beginning. The real magic happened in the years that followed, when we chose love over fear, honesty over convenience, and compassion over revenge." The end. Now tell me what you thought of this touching story and where you're watching from. Do you believe love can truly create miracles like it did for David and Emily? Leave a comment sharing your own experiences with moments where love changed everything. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories about families that form in extraordinary ways.